Ask most voters in the UK whether they trust their politicians to act in the best interests of the constituents they are supposed to represent, and the overwhelming majority will respond with an emphatic no. According to King's College London, only 17% of the UK's population trust the UK government and think it is doing a good job, which ranks the UK among the lowest for trust internationally, and puts it on a par with countries like Russia, Mexico and Nigeria. And although the Scottish Parliament is an executive branch of Westminster which can overturn any decisions made in Edinburgh, and despite the fact that the government in England controls all of Scotland's budgets, trust in the devolved Scottish Government, according to a recent social attitude survey, is far higher, with 61% of voters in Scotland trusting the Scottish Government to work in Scotland's best interests, compared to just 15% who trust the UK Government to do so. The takeaway conclusion from these surveys is that Scotland would clearly be better off making all its own decisions in its own best interests, much like virtually all normal independent countries do. But the government in England will continue to block any move towards Scottish independence, as it relies heavily on Scotland's natural resources flowing into England with little or no economic benefit to Scotland. But despite far higher levels of trust for Scotland's partially devolved government, pressure is currently being brought to bear on the Scottish Government by a group called Respect Scottish Sovereignty to sign up to internationally recognised political rights that would ensure that the existing sovereignty of the Scottish people is fully respected, recognised in Scots law, and not ignored by the political class. In fact, Scots, unlike their counterparts in England, have always been sovereign over their government, but they, as part of the UK, have been absorbed into an English system in which they and their representatives have little or no influence, and where the Westminster Parliament governs through the authority of the English monarch, which in England is sovereign. This recognition in Scots law believes Respect Scottish Sovereignty would ensure direct democracy in Scotland and would allow for politicians to be more easily held to account. In other words, the people would be the boss, not the politicians. But is such a system possible, or even workable? The answer is yes. It already operates successfully in Switzerland, arguably the most democratic nation on earth. In Switzerland, the people can challenge any new laws through binding referenda, and they can even introduce legislation, as well as make changes to the country's written constitution. This, says Henry Ferguson of Direct Democracy, who is originally from East Renfrewshire, but who has lived in Switzerland since the 1970s, would keep politicians back home in check.
Probably the most important thing about the way Switzerland operates is we're completely decentralized. We have a constitution which has two sovereigns. The people are sovereign. People can do anything they want 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The people are sovereign. But the Constitution doesn't say that. What the Constitution says is a decentralized message, and the Constitution says that the regions are sovereign. And that is absolutely key to understanding the way that Switzerland operates. And that translates into what are called political rights. So the people and the cantons work together, the people in the regions work together, and that's how in Scotland, for example, the Strathclyde referendum came about, because the region and the people clubbed together and they beat Westminster together. So that's the way Switzerland operates, regions and people together. Initiatives, the people can initiate any piece of legislation they want. All they need is 100,000 signatures obtained over an 18-month period. A referendum, an initiative is an agenda-setting vote. The politicians have forgotten to do something or don't want to do something, and the people do, so they have an initiative. A referendum, on the other hand, is when the politicians, the parliament and the government propose legislation, and the people don't like that. It's what in Switzerland we call bad laws. If the politicians propose a bad law, the people initiate a referendum, and this time it's only 50,000 votes, and it's required the signatures have to be obtained over a 3-month period. So it's quite quick, and it's quick because the political process has taken place. Everybody knows what the issues are. There's no learning process involved in a referendum. So it's very quick, it's 90 days. And then after the 90-day period, either the people have rejected have obtained the 50,000 signatures, or they haven't. And if they have obtained the signatures, there's a national vote. The figures are quite interesting. For referendums since 1874, excuse me, there's only 2 referendums a year. People say in Scotland to me, wow, that must be expensive having all these referendums, these initiatives. That must cost a lot of money. And my reply to that, quite frankly, is, well, think about how much money Parliament costs you. It costs you a bundle of money. And what are the people getting? How much money is being paid to listen to the people? And the answer in Scotland is precisely 0. And here in Switzerland, it's very impressive, because 4 times a year we receive this kind of document. That costs a lot of money. 4 times a year, the Swiss voter receives an envelope. I just received my envelope, and this is a vote that's coming on the 24th of November. We'll be voting about 4 things. We're voting about whether or not to extend the autoroutes. We're voting about 2 issues related to leasing of property. We're voting about sickness insurance and who should pay for medical attention, which is ambulatory as opposed to residential within a hospital. So we're talking about nitty-gritty, day-to-day issues which we're having a national vote about. And here at the 3rd level, at the middle level of government, my level in the Canton Valley, in the region of the Valley, we'll be voting on the 24th of November about climate change. So we've already had a national vote about climate change about 6 months ago. Now we're going to have a local vote within the region on climate change.
This level of democratic involvement leads to a more consensual form of government, where politicians work with the people they represent to come to a consensus on various issues. It ensures that issues which are important to the people are not simply kicked into the long grass by politicians exercising their own agendas. But the model being proposed for Scotland is based on previous precedent in Scotland, including the resistance to Skye Road bridge tolls in the 1990s and the 1994 referendum on water privatisation, which the government in England wanted to impose on Scotland, but which was successfully challenged by the then Strathclyde Regional Council, which was later abolished by Westminster in what many regard as an act of retribution. But, says Henry Ferguson, it's a successful model targeting entrenched political and financial power, and it works. However, Scotland, as part of the UK, doesn't enjoy direct democracy, and politicians can simply make pledges, which they don't keep, and do more or less whatever they want during their term of office, regardless of what the people think. That doesn't happen in Switzerland.
Here in Switzerland, we've got direct democracy, which you don't have in the UK. Direct democracy means the politicians have to front up at each one of the 3 levels of government. They have the politicians are elected, they're accountable to the people, and they know that at each level, the politicians at each level, they know they're going to be faced, if they don't do a good job, they're going to be faced with either an initiative, the people are going to ask them to take action to sort out something they've been ignoring all these years, 4 or 5 years of a parliamentary term, or they're going to be asked to, they're going to be faced with a referendum whereby the people are calling into question, they don't want to have imposed on them what in Switzerland we call bad law, and the politicians actively work to avoid introducing so-called bad law. And the record, if you look at the record of referendums over the last 190 years or so, the evidence very clearly is that the politicians don't propose bad law because they know they're going to be faced with a referendum. You don't have that. That just doesn't exist under the British system. So from that point of view, these are called political rights. They're enshrined in the, notably the International Covenant on Political and Civil Rights. Switzerland observes that. The UK government signed that covenant in 1976 and hasn't done a damn thing about it. The UK government is being strongly criticised by the United Nations Human Rights Committee. The Scottish government is being strongly criticised by the Scottish Human Rights Commission. These criticisms date from the beginning of 2024. They've been going on. The situation has been as it is internationally for the UK from 1976 and from Scotland from 1998, because the Scotland Act 1998 allows the Scottish government to introduce this international covenant and to introduce these political rights, initiatives and referendums. You could have them tomorrow in Scotland if the Scottish government was doing its job. And recently, myself and a group with whom I'm working, we've proposed a petition to the Scottish government, to the Petitions Committee, to try and push the politicians towards the notion that maybe they should start cooperating with the people instead of basically having a pretty cushy number as MSPs in Holyrood.
So, what are the chances the politicians at Holyrood will listen?
Well, I said earlier that Scotland and Switzerland have the same fundamental principle of popular sovereignty. So why aren't the two countries operating in the same way? Well, I think the answer basically is the Scottish government has abdicated its responsibility. It's abdicated it in favour of the, let's say, the UK way of government. But the evidence is, if you look at a paper which was prepared by the Scottish government last June about a constitution for an independent Scotland, that document openly talks about popular sovereignty. It makes statements that Scotland has popular sovereignty. It also makes statements, one particular statement on page 39, if I remember, about the applicability of the International Covenant on political and civil rights, and it makes reference to the possibility for the Scottish people to have initiatives and referendums. But it doesn't, for some unknown reason. The Scottish government hasn't done that. It could do it tomorrow. And that's what we are saying in the petition which we have filed with the Petitions Authority last week, that Scotland has the power right now, because of popular sovereignty and because of the terms of the International Covenant. Scotland could have tomorrow access to political rights which they can't have in England, because they are a parliamentary sovereignty with a king. We don't have a king in Scotland. We don't have parliamentary sovereignty. We have popular sovereignty, which means direct political rights, which means initiatives and referendums. Why the Scottish government aren't using the possibilities that are open to them today, I'm afraid it beats the hell out of me. The petition, the underlying logic of the petition which we have just filed, it's based on two speeches which were made at the SNP annual conference at the beginning of September. The opening speech by Keith Brown. Keith Brown said, almost textually, the people who decide things in Scotland are the people. We have popular sovereignty in Scotland. Dixit, Keith Brown. That was the opening speech. In the closing speech, John Swinney, the First Minister, he said, I have utmost faith in the Scottish people that if they have the right tools, they will be capable of building the nation they want. And I don't know whether I should say with tongue in cheek, are you kidding? But the petition puts him in front of his responsibilities, because the petition does exactly that, and it asks the Scottish government to implement the international covenant, which would give John Swinney the tools to allow the Scottish people to start building their nation.
Respect Scottish sovereignty, and groups like Salvo intend to keep the pressure up to get the Scottish Government to sign up to Article 25 of the International Covenant on Political Rights. Already Salvo have been successful in getting a Holyrood proposal for juryless trials in Scotland withdrawn by the Scottish Government, which Henry sees as a chink of light in securing real change in the way things are done in Scotland, and that includes a more localised system known as subsidiarity. With a far more decentralised Swiss system, many more decisions are made at local canton level, so much so that Switzerland does not even have a prime minister. It has 7 of them, 1 for each canton. The Swiss political system is geared to long-term efficiency and consensus, which is far more effective, especially when planning long-term goals. And the Swiss take direct democracy very seriously. After all, every political decision taken has direct consequences in everyone's day-to-day lives.
So the Democracy Tower, we see it actually as kind of a part of a worldwide infrastructure for democracy. And one of our main goals is to provide safe and open spaces for discussions and dialogue with all different kinds of groups of people, but also on very different topics. And the base for these discussions is basically an installation that we have here based on 3 questions. The first one is, who is included in a democracy? The second one is, which topics are being discussed in politics or society, and also very important, by whom are they discussed, and also how is the quality of the discussion? And the third question is, how do we decide together as a society? So this is the basis for all our work. And also another important aspect for us is to kind of engage or motivate people to act for democracy, to speak about their topics, and also to see democracy something as a way of life and something of their everyday lives. So we try to do this with different elements here in the Democracy Tower.
So will Scotland follow Switzerland's example? Henry believes it will, but the Scottish public will need to get serious about securing their rights to enable real change and improve their lives.
I've only been involved in, I've lived in Switzerland for 50 years, but I've only been involved in Scottish popular sovereignty for the last 2, when a lady called Sarah Salyers went public with the research she'd been doing on internet, and Sarah asked if anyone was interested in contacting her. So at that time, I'd already contributed to the Smith Commission several years back. I contacted Sarah. We started talking. She had already done extensive research to prove Scotland's history of popular sovereignty. So the groundwork had already been done. And that groundwork, Sarah's done a fantastic job. Salvo's done a fantastic job of educating the Scottish public that the foundations of Scottish constitutional law is popular sovereignty. And when you read the government publication from June 2023, I did a word count of popular sovereignty. I think it was mentioned something like 20 times. If you do a word count on the right of the people to exercise their popular sovereignty, i.e. direct democracy, when you do a word count on direct democracy, you come up with precisely 0. The only mention, the only thing that approaches a mention of direct democracy is one paragraph on page 39, which talks about Article 25 of the International Covenant, which would give the people the rights to political rights, as in Switzerland, initiatives, referendums, petitions, Some people say petitions are a right. Yes, petitions are a right, but they're not going to lead you anywhere, because in Switzerland, in Scotland, and in England, even worse in England, petitions can be sidelined by the politicians. They are only, you get all the signatures, and we've got a petition which was first launched in the middle of August. We've revised it after discussion with the petition office in Holyrood. We've revised it and resubmitted the petition. And if the Scottish people want to get really serious about convincing their MSPs to listen to them, once this petition is published, personally I'm optimistic that it will be published by the Petitions Office and the Petitions Committee after consultation with the Scottish Government. But once it's published, the Scottish people, they've got to start signing this petition, because that's the message to the politicians. The petition says that the requests the government to implement the international covenant, i.e. political rights, i.e. initiatives and referendums, during this parliamentary term. And our organisation, and I'm teamed up with another 3 key people, with the 4 of us, we constitute now a small grouping called Respect Scottish Sovereignty. We've got a website, respectscottishsovereignty.scot, which is primarily directed at educating the Scottish public. And we're going to use this website, and one of our group has a blog called dearscotland.substack.com, and with the help of our other 2 members, Andy Anderson, who is a campaigner from the days of the Skye Road Bridge campaign, and David Younger is the 4th member. David's got experience in electronic voting, notably. Together with that group, we're going to be working over the rest of this parliamentary term to convince MSPs to implement that covenant. And if they don't implement that covenant, we're going to be pushing for a change of MSPs, because the MSPs have to listen to the people. And that means the people have to sign this petition.
If you would like more information about Respect Scottish Sovereignty, visit their website at respectscottishsovereignty.scot. For more information about the Pollitt Forum Bern, visit their website, pollitt-forum-bern.ch. For more information about the Scotland Channel and how you can help to create an alternative independent media in Scotland, visit our website thescotlandchannel.com, where you can also get details of forthcoming films. Please like, share and subscribe to the Scotland Channel at youtube.com/@thescotlandchannel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell to be notified of more great content from the Scotland Channel.